The disappearance of the ancient Sheikah technology is one of the greatest mysteries within Tears of the Kingdom. When we arrive back in Hyrule after descending from the Great Sky Island with Raru's arm, there are no Sheikah shrines, towers, weapons, almost nothing. By the time of the events of Tears of the Kingdom, there is still some Sheikah technology around, but for the most part, it's all gone. It's kind of old news at this point, but we did get an answer from Series Director Hidemaro Fujibayashi on what happened to the Sheikah technology in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, since I initially recorded this video, there's been some growing unrest over the lore and story of Tears of the Kingdom amongst the Zelda community. I completely understand if Tears of the Kingdom did not deliver in the ways you might have hoped for, but I am going to attempt to add some rationale to the quote that we were given regarding the Sheikah technology. So before you click away, because I am trying to justify what we were given, I hope that you'll give this video a chance, because my goal is truly to explore the validity of the quote and answer the question, does it make sense? I think the answer might surprise you. I'll be using the quotes provided by IGN in their article discussing the topic, but the interview was published by Telegraph UK behind a paywall. So Hidemaro Fujibayashi explains that they disappeared after the calamity was defeated or sealed. All of the people of Hyrule also witnessed this, but there is no one who knows the mechanism or reason why they disappeared, and it is considered a mystery. It is believed that since the calamity disappeared, they also disappeared as their role had been fulfilled. Now, I've seen a lot of dismay over this answer, and to some degree I get that, but there might actually be some in-game lore that justifies it. I'll offer that explanation a little later in the video because I want to go through some of the points Fujibayashi makes in his quote. So Link defeats Calamity Ganon and Zelda seals it away at the end of Breath of the Wild. What doesn't exactly line up with Fujibayashi's explanation is that after the calamity is defeated, we can still see the Sheikah technology. The Sheikah pillars surrounding the castle are glowing blue and standing tall in the final cutscene of the game. In the secret ending that you get after you defeat all the Blights, Zelda specifically notes that Varuta seems to have stopped working. We can see the divine beasts in the Sheikah towers, so it's not like they just poofed away. It's still there. But the fact that it stopped working is interesting and somewhat lines up with the quote that Fujibayashi just gave us. So Breath of the Wild ends and the Sheikah technology remains. However, given the fact that Varuta stopped working, it is possible that the Sheikah technology slowly started to fail before disappearing altogether. In order for Fujibayashi's explanation to make sense, that has to be the case. As for the people of Hyrule witnessing the disappearance of the technology, that comes with a little bit of surprise that no one really mentions this event by the time the events of Tears of the Kingdom take place, but I suppose no one needs to since Link would have seen it as well. I think that if this was pre-planned lore, an NPC at some point would have mused to Link, hey, you know what? The giant eagle that can fire a giant laser beam that flies up in the sky, yeah, that would be really helpful right about now, as all of the monsters and the upheaval happens. So I struggle to believe that this was pre-planned lore, but it is possible the Zelda team decided to avoid the ancient Sheikah technology, much like they avoided bringing up Cass because it only served as an Easter egg towards Breath of the Wild. The final point made is that it is believed that since the calamity was defeated, they had served their purpose and disappeared. Now, there are definitely some issues with this that require some mental gymnastics to justify. The Varuta in the room is that there was already a calamity. The calamity 10,000 years ago also saw the 4 divine beasts and guardians involved. The ancient hero and the princess defeated the calamity 10,000 years ago with the help of the divine beasts and the guardians. As far as we know, they didn't disappear once they had served their purpose. Or is it possible the divine beasts actually did disappear after each calamity? Here come the mental gymnastics. In Breath of the Wild, we can clearly see that the divine beasts were buried and had to be excavated. They were discovered during King Rome's efforts to prepare for Calamity Ganon. But they were buried by order of the king that ruled over Hyrule after the calamity of 10,000 years ago. This too is merely a legend in Hyrule's history. The only explanation I can come up with is that the Sheikah magic controlling the disappearing somehow knew that the calamity we faced in Breath of the Wild was the final calamity. If you think about the time travel implications laid out in Tears of the Kingdom, once Zelda travels back in time and creates the Bootstrap Paradox, every event between Hyrule's founding and the reawakening of Ganondorf is preordained. There is a possibility that the ancient Sheikahs somehow pre-programmed their spell, so that when Zelda sealed away the Calamity Ganon for the final time, that started the clock when the Sheikah technology would disappear. It's this disappearing spell that the Sheikah are apparently able to cast that Fujibayashi seems to be implying when he says the ancient Sheikah technology mysteriously disappeared. But we've actually seen this spell in work in the game. We do see the ancient Sheikah in Breath of the Wild, 128 of them plus Monk Mazkoshia, to be exact. Each get their own shrine, and when you complete that shrine, what happens? That's right, they vanished into space because their purpose had been fulfilled. The mummified Sheikah monks waited tens of thousands of years, waiting for the hero of the wild to come to their shrine and test his ability. Once the hero had proven himself capable, the monk would transfer a spirit orb onto him, and then disappear. It would be my best guess that this is exactly what it would have looked like when the divine beasts and all the other technology would have disappeared. I think it's fair to assume that the divine beasts, without their pilots, were not able to be moved from the resting places that they ended up in Breath of the Wild. That would mean that Vah Rudania continued to sit upon Death Mountain, Vah Meadow atop Rito Village, Vah Ruda above East Reservoir Lake, and Vah Naboris over Spectacle Rock. For most locations in Hyrule, at least one of the beasts were visible. There were also the towers run for each region, then the hundreds upon hundreds of guardians, and the shrines, one of which was always located near a major landmark. The disappearing spell that the Sheikah must have had would have caused all of these things to disappear, much like the Sheikah monks did when you completed a shrine. The final stone left unturned on this topic is the matter of the technology that still exists during the events of Tears of the Kingdom. You have the travel points at each Skyview Tower, the Poor Pad, and this guardian that still sits on top of the Hateno Ancient Research Lab. Why didn't these vanish mysteriously like the rest of the ancient Sheikah technology? I think the answer is that it's ancient Sheikah tech that was manipulated in some way that broke the spell. Let's start with the Pura Pad. Obviously this was created by Pura, so it didn't even have the incantation cast upon it. The travel points of the Skyview Towers and the arms that send you flying, those were also the modern Sheikah technology. Pura and her team took the technology and reworked it for use at the new towers all across Hyrule. As for the Guardian on top of the research lab, yeah, I think this is more than likely an oversight. I don't see how that Guardian wouldn't have disappeared. I mean, maybe that Guardian's power is being used to power the research lab, and when the Guardian was drained of its life force in the manner it was, then the spell no longer applied to this Guardian? I mean, yes, there were plenty of non-functional Guardians all around Hyrule and Breath of the Wild, but they were simply turned off, juxtaposed by the Guardian at the research lab, which had clearly been manipulated. So is Fujibayashi's quote justified by the established lore from Breath of the Wild? Ultimately, no. There are the couple of instances where you can make sense of the ancient Sheikah technology disappearing. The Sheikah clearly had a spell or method of some sort to make things vanish when their purpose was fulfilled. We saw that after every shrine that we completed. The line where Zelda claims Vah Ruda had stopped working also fits this narrative, because it's probable that it stopped functioning prior to its disappearance. The fact that no one in Hyrule mentions the Sheikah technology is a bit strange, but given the events of the upheaval and the disappearance of the princess and new monarch, I'd be willing to chalk that one up to the fact that everyone's mind was preoccupied with other things. I'm being pretty forgiving with that one. But ultimately, here's what I think happened with regard to the Sheikah technology. Ideas that likely made their way into Tears of the Kingdom were originally DLC. The Zelda team famously expressed that they build a fun game first and then craft a story around that. So when it didn't make sense in this new game to have all these pieces of Sheikah technology lying around, they needed a reason for it. Everything simply vanishing was consistent with the monks and the shrines, but there are oversights that can't be justified. I seriously doubt that they worked it into the lore that only after this calamity specifically was defeated that would cause the technology to disappear. There's no in-game reference or lore to justify that. In fact, the contrary exists, as the beasts were physically buried only to be dug up once more. The Guardian atop the Akala Research Lab? Yeah, that should have disappeared, but they didn't modify the model for the building like they should have. My conclusion is that they definitely came up with an answer as to why everything disappeared, but they didn't flush it out and account for it during the development. The technology was a massive component of Breath of the Wild. There's just no way in my mind that the development team was so ignorant to the story that they just sent thousands of models into the recycle bin and didn't think, oh yeah, we should explain that. It was just too big of a component of Breath of the Wild. My concern is they said, yeah, it all disappeared, but then they just didn't elaborate on that by including snippets of dialogue in the game. I hope that we continue to get more quotes and insights into the world of Hyrule as seen within Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, since apparently we aren't getting DLC. Even if there's some mental gymnastics that need to be done to rationalize the answer, or even if we don't accept the answer, it gives us something to talk and theorize about, which is what I enjoy doing most. If you enjoyed listening to my thoughts, then I hope you consider subscribing to Chat Nation. I think the button should be glowing, and that's a somewhat new feature on YouTube, which is a pretty neat addition. So let me know in the comments if you have any more thoughts about the disappearance of the ancient Sheikah technology so that we can continue the conversation, Chat Nation.